How do you want your children to remember you?
You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode 131. Today, we're talking about 3 steps to stop yelling with Anna Seewald. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast. Here, it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I coach overstressed moms on how to cultivate calm in their daily lives and to create more peace and cooperation in their families. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I'm the mom of 2 girls who challenge me every day to hone my craft. Oh my goodness, to be sure. It has been the start of school and has been challenging. I've been using my tools, people. I've been using my tools, but you know what? No one ever said this whole parenting thing is going to be pretty or easy. Even if you're using some good skills to build cooperation, it does get easier. But you know what? There's nothing that's going to erase some of the messiness. Parenting is just messy. Somehow we always get surprised at that. I get surprised. I should be surprised. I mean, it's just messy and life is messy and we can't expect it to be other than that, right? This is just the nature of life, is that it's hard and it's challenging and there are moments. Can you tell I've had some moments recently? Can you tell? But today we're going to be talking to my good friend Anna Seewald. She's coming back on the podcast. She is the founder of Authentic Parenting. She's a speaker, author, and podcaster and a parent educator. And she has a background in psychology and education. She's worked with kids for nearly 18 years, and today she helps parents, and she's a dear friend. I love her so much, and this is a really great episode. She gives us 3 steps to stop yelling. And it's, yelling is a big topic. People write to me about this all the time, and we know in our gut that it's harmful to yell, but it's so hard to stop. So, dear listener, who I haven't told yet, by the way, that I am so grateful that you have decided to put me in your ears today. I'm so glad we get this chance to connect, and welcome back. If you're a fan of the podcast and you've been listening, I'm really glad to connect with you. It makes a huge difference. So welcome. But anyway, in this episode, I invite you to come with me and sit down with me as I talk to Anna about how yelling affects children and 3 steps you really need to stop. And I had a lot of takeaways from talking to Anna about this. It's talking about this idea that you'll hear about our overall stress level and how that really makes a huge impact on this, right? And the need to tell our brain that we are safe in this moment, and seeing how we look at our children, right? And also how yelling affects children. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So you are going to have a lot to listen to, my friend, in this episode. So I know that you are going to love it and join me at the table as I talk to Anna. Quickly before I do, I just want to let you know that the Mindful Parenting course free training is starting up. And the free training will be at mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training, and anybody can join. We're going to be diving deep. I'll be there live every day at 2 p.m. and they'll be recording if you can't make it. And then the Mindful Parenting course is starting up, and we only open the course twice a year right now. So the course covers everything you need in the order you need it. And, we give you a whole year of support because we know these changes aren't easy. So I would love to have you join me in that Mindful Parenting tribe. It's an amazing, wonderful, active group of amazing mindful mamas we are just really real and honest about struggling. And yeah, so I hope you'll come and join us, mindfulparentingcourse.com. And now on to this episode. Anna, thank you so much for coming back on the Mindful Mama podcast again. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Hunter. Yay, I'm excited to be back.
Yay! Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you too. So, wanted to talk to you because I get emails all the time that say, like, I get so frustrated with my kids. They don't listen to me unless I yell with them. I don't want to yell. So, I thought it would be great to bring you back on and talk to you specifically about yelling and our frustration as moms. So, I'm so glad you can come and talk to us about this.
Yes, I hope I will provide some, helpful tips and ideas and a peace of mind for the parents who resort to yelling sometimes.
Yes, yes. So the first thing I think we should talk about with this is kind of why we should try not to yell. And of course, we're going to talk about this with the caveat that we're all human, but we're all going to yell sometimes and we're not going to be quote unquote perfect, and that perfect isn't even what we want, right? Because if we were going to be perfectly calm all the time and meet every single one of our kids' needs, then they would have no resilience, right? They would get out into the world and be like, life is hard, I can't deal with anything, right? So we don't want to have our kids get every single one of their needs met all the time. They have to deal with the ups and downs of life, right? So but with that said, we know we don't want to yell a lot, but why? Can you tell us a little bit more about children and the way that we develop when we're young and why yelling isn't so good?
Yes, yes, this is a great topic for me. Let's explore why we yell and how it affects children, and then why we should stop yelling. And let me just say that it's not about how to stop yelling, even though I have a course that's called How to Stop Yelling. I have a domain name, howtostopyelling.com. But I don't want people to feel pressured that that's the end goal. That's a possibility for some of us. There are Zen-like parents out there. I
Like
think
me? No, just kidding.
The point should be for all of us to yell less and less and less, and that's possible. I see it in my work. I see it in my parenting. We don't have to yell and scream at every little thing. There's a reason we do. It becomes a very, very bad habit. And negative bad habits become ingrained in our mind, in our brain. And it's like, it's so hard to just pluck it and get rid of it.
Yes.
Replace it with something positive. It's a lot harder. But let's look at how yelling affects children and their brain and their development. Again, depending on the age of your children, the younger the children, the effects are more so, I would say, jarring, negative in some ways, but it's not like you will traumatize your children for the rest of their life. Although I would say, in rare cases, probably, if you're yelling, if you're neglectful, if you have abuse, right, a combination of so many factors, then it will have harmful effects. But probably that person is not listening to this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So people who are more mindful, who are on this path, are listening to this show. And well, children's brain is developing very rapidly. The human brain actually is so fascinating. At birth, the neurons of the brain, 90% of the neurons, those are the cells of the brain, are present. 85% of connection between those neurons get established and wired in by age 4 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so by age 4 or 5, again, your child's brain reaches 90% of adult size. So the first 3 years of a child's life, from birth to 3, is so important in building the foundation, the attachment, the brain, the wiring. And the brain is a use-dependent organ, meaning whatever gets cultivated gets wired. If there are negative experiences, that shapes the brain. If they're positive, equally it shapes the brain. So it's a use dependent. If you play classical music for your baby, if you take them to museums and stuff like that, that kind of wiring will take place. Likewise, if there is neglect, abuse, some parts of the brain will not be cultivated. The relational aspect, social engagement system will not be as engaged or responsive later in life. And to give you more alarming statistics or facts, the first year, we know from research now, and this is so fascinating to me as a trauma person who is interested and works with traumatized population, the first year of a child's life is so significant. It determines the trajectory of your rest of your life. So let me give you a little clear explanation. Let's say there are two babies. One baby, the first year of that one baby was very calm, nurturing, attachment was present, the household environment was, somewhat normal, nurturing, and things like that. Very adequate and optimal for development that first year. Well, if that child grows up and has a very adverse life, let's say trauma and other things later in life, he's primed because the first year was so fundamentally good, so to speak. He can be more resilient, recover, bounce back easily, etc. However, the opposite is true. If someone whose first year of life was very tumultuous, abuse, neglect, divorce, and domestic violence, the child's needs were not met, that kind of stuff, like from birth to the first year, through the first year. And let's say after the first year, the child's life turned a really happy, good, nurturing, a good family, good relationships, a normal household, everything just normalized, right? That child is always going to have different type of resiliency, like the bounce back ability is going to be thwarted and hindered. So the first year of life, we know, is so crucial. It just gives you so much stuff for the rest of your life.
This is where everybody gets worried, right? Like, oh my God, have I messed up my kid? Like, we know that first year of life is so crucial. Mm-hmm. And then we think, oh my gosh, I remember hearing hearing that the first birth to 3 years was so crucial. And then thinking like, especially after the first year for me anyway, was that then as they get to be 2, like we get triggered and the anger comes up and we get so frustrated and thinking like, oh my God, I'm messing up my kid. You must hear that too.
Yes, all the time. But that doesn't mean that this is a life sentence, right? We also know that the brain is neuroplastic. We also know that as adults, we can get into healthy, attached relationships and recover. We know, again, from science, from neuroscience, that we can grow inner strengths and become more resilient and confident and capable later in life. The reason I'm emphasizing this is if there are new mothers out there, if there are pregnant moms out there, to take this information to the heart. And for the rest of us who didn't have this information, let's say, it's okay. Listen to the rest of this podcast. There is other stuff that we can do to improve, rewire the brain and things like that, and have a better, happier, more joyful life.
Yeah. So yelling in particular, sometimes, I talk about how our fight, flight, or freeze, our stress response is triggered, right, by our kids freaking out or whatever it is. And so we become reactive. And in some ways, that's really kind of not our fault. But with the yelling, we're trying not to yell because we're triggering that same response in our kids, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, and the yelling is that somewhat natural, let's say, response to threat, to danger in the environment. And well, let me back up a little bit. So there is a process called neuroception. This is a term coined by Stephen Porges. It's basically your brain's ability to detect danger and threat in the environment or in a relationship. And our brain is wired to look for the negative because that's how evolutionarily we're wired, so that we can protect ourselves. But we live in a modern society. We don't need that negativity bias so much. So let's say it's not only our children that can trigger our fight or flight or stress response, right? When I talk about this, I talk about in more general terms. It's your entire stress is responsible for this. And you know very well, we live in a very fast-paced, go, 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 do, high stress society. In fact, 75% of Americans report being moderately stressed, 25% severely stressed. And we know that stress can affect your well-being, your health, your relationships. And the funny thing is, you get used to the level of stress you have in your life today, and that becomes your normal, your baseline, so to speak. So you're not even aware that you have high stress or moderate stress in your day, in your life. And on top of that, your children trigger you. Everything appears to be a threat or a danger, right? When your general state of stress is heightened, when your stress response is on all the time, well, of course, you yourself are going to view yourself as a source of threat too. You're going to talk negatively towards yourself. You're going to judge yourself. You're going to judge others. You're going to fight with your husband, yell at your children, because you have elevated levels of stress. So I talk about this a lot, and I want parents to know that yelling is just one component of this. Yelling should be a sign that, hey, mama, pay attention to your stress level. What can you do to identify where your stress comes from? What can you do to reduce, eliminate stress from your daily life? And what can you do to manage your daily stress so that you can be less overwhelmed, peaceful, calm, patient, more attentive and loving towards yourself and towards children and others in your life. And yelling will disappear with that. It will be less and less and yet less.
Because when we have the bandwidth to be calm and present, that's when it happens. When we're thinking about the next thing to do, when we're just planning the next dinner, when we're just always one step ahead of where we're going or 5 steps ahead, and then our child has a problem, we can't be present for it because of that, moderate to high stress level. It's why that self-care is not a nice thing to do. It's actually your responsibility. It's actually something that is really crucial, is to sort of slow down. And well, we've talked about that a lot in many other episodes, but I really appreciate the way, Anna, that you are highlighting that the stress level, and that the reducing and managing your own stress level and feeling better in your day-to-day life and day-to-day world is a huge and important component of this. Hunter here. I just want to interrupt this conversation for just a minute to tell you about some exciting things we have coming up. Are you frustrated with parenting? Do you want to practice conscious, compassionate parenting, but you don't know how? It's not easy, and there's no roadmap for this. Until now. I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I know how frustrating it is because I've been there. I struggled as a young mom, and when I found myself yelling and triggered by my child, I knew there had to be a better way, and there is. Mindful parenting is different from other parenting trainings. They don't tell you that all of that good advice is as good as useless when our internal stress response is triggered. Mindful parenting teaches you research-based tools and practices to reduce your stress response so that you can respond rather than react. And it teaches you exactly what to say so that you can create willing cooperation from your child. You can learn more and enroll at mindfulparentingcourse.com, and you can join us for a free live training coming up soon where you'll learn why your kids don't listen to you, how your brain undermines your parenting, and how to create cooperative kids without losing your temper. Sign up now at mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. That's mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. I'll see you there.
And self-care, I think when a person is stressed out like that, I usually ask parents to think of this like, do you know when you cross the threshold from being normally stressed to stressed out, right? When do you go to that red zone? when you are in that red zone, when you are highly stressed and your stress response is on, you're not going to think about self-care because you know what I mean? It's counterintuitive and counterproductive to the state that you biologically are. So it's an intentional, mindful choice to just even force it and fake it self-care until you get this sorted out. And then it will feel normal. And then you will crave self-care, right? This whole
Fake it till you make it, honey.
yes. And then it will be more appropriate. But when you are highly alerted or hijacked like that, you don't even think about self-care. It's not important. It's not a priority biologically for you in your body. Your body rejects yourself too, unintentionally, right? Unconsciously. It's like I myself know when I'm highly stressed, when I'm getting like, when I'm running out of time, when I want to do many things, but everything is collapses and I'm clumsy and I'm rushed and hurried. And I always have this image, the train is running and I'm just running after the train, trying to hop on that train, but the train is just going fast. That's the life. That's the happenings of life. And I'm not going to hop on that train. I can never do that, right? The train is a lot faster. So when I catch myself in that situation, I'm like, I'm stressed. I need to take a break, eat, drink, do whatever it takes for you to calm down, to regain your equilibrium, to get to the next station and hop on a train like in a relaxed manner. And the life will be the same. Problems will still be there, but your attitude and how you show up to those problems will be significantly different.
And that's the mature way of looking at this, like the way of looking at this from a perspective of understanding and knowing yourself. Because when we're in that stress state, we think, oh, if I just get these 5 things done, then I'm going to feel better. And the truth is, sorry guys, I got a cold. So anyway, but the truth is exactly what you said, that actually we have to stop doing for a little bit. We have to stop that momentum and deliberately make a choice to slow ourselves down and to slow down the momentum that's pushing us and pushing us and pushing us more and more and more. So that can be so hard those first couple times you do it, when your whole body, your whole being wants to say, just get the things done and then you'll feel better. But trust us, coming from me, coming from Anna, we've worked with a lot of people on this. Actually, fake it till you make it. Slow down and practice stopping, and then take those next steps.
I agree. And then you won't yell, right? Everything will not be a threat or a danger to your system, including your children, right? Then you won't yell. Then you will have a lot more patience. You can just practice mindfulness later and grow your patience even bigger and bigger. But those are I think fundamental steps towards getting to, yelling less.
Yeah, exactly. So we are trying not to yell. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to talking about the kids, right? And the children. So when we're yelling, we're triggering their stress response. And can you share with us how that affects kids when they're living with that stress response, and how it affects our relationship as we're growing up, right? Because we're yelling because we're frustrated, we want cooperation. So does this help us in this endeavor or not?
Well, yelling, let me give one fact, in fact, before I tell you the effects of yelling. So the way the brain perceives yelling and the way our brain perceives normal speech like such as we're speaking is completely different. If you hear my voice at the moment, it goes through your ear, it travels through different pathways in your brain, reaches to the auditory center in your brain, gets interpreted there. It's a female voice, somewhat pleasant, it has an accent, blah, blah, blah. You interpret, you give meaning to that, and you understand the message. However, if we yell and scream, which is evolutionarily built into our system as a protective mechanism, right, for self-preservation, yelling has a different route. It goes through your ear and it hits the amygdala right away. It's shortcutted. It triggers your fear center right away because, again, evolutionarily, you didn't have time to interpret, is that a lion's voice or a tiger? What a pleasant lioness voice, blah, blah, blah. You would be killed, eaten by that animal. So this is evolutionarily built in so that you can be alert and jump into self-protective stress mode. That's what but in modern life, we're just yelling at our kids, right? There is no real danger per se. We have financial issues. We have marital issues, stuff like that. Modern day issues that trigger the stress response. So that's what how yelling gets interpreted. So when we yell at our children, even if I yell now, everybody will jump off of their seats. Or if you're driving a car, of course I won't do it. You will have a reaction to that. So it's pretty powerful how knowing this information, I think, is crucial. That's the first thing. How it affects children. Well, then imagine how it will affect children. Little children, it rings their alarm bell all the time in their brain when you're yelling. As they get older, they get used to it and accustomed and desensitized. Let's say if you've been yelling for 10 years and your child is now 10, the response is not the same as a 10-year-old or as a 2-year-old, right? As a 2-year-old, it would have frightened your child. Stress response was more hijack their brain. But as a 10-year-old, they may tune you out and things like that. But again, they have no control how it affects them, right? Through the ear, it triggers their stress response. It goes to the fear center, and your child, stress response is activated. And what do? They fight back, they talk back, they don't listen, they don't run away, they withdraw, they do all of those things that is related to the stress response. It's not that they are misbehaving, quote unquote, badly. It's a stress behavior, right? We inadvertently
trigger their resistance, right? It's actually completely counterproductive to what we're wanting. We're trying to get cooperation, and we're triggering their fight, flight, or freeze.
Exactly. And so when a child is in that place, what happens is, we know the prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, goes offline right away when we are stressed, right? That's that hijacking that happens. And so, because it's not important when you are under danger, when your brain thinks you're under danger, thinking is not important, right? Analyzing, comparing, reasoning is not important. Run away, protect yourself, that's of a priority. So children who are in this state that do not know how to sit still, are fidgety, hyperactive, they don't pay attention, they have a hard time learning new stuff, they're forgetful, they're disorganized. These are all signs of high levels of stress or chronic stress. At times I see toxic stress in our children's lives. And it's not always the stress comes from parental yelling or ineffective parenting. Children also have a lot of stress in their life. I don't want parents to think that, oh my gosh, my yelling does all of this harms. No. It's not only you. Your child has life, relationships, your child goes to school. There's so many things, sporting activity,
siblings.
I can give you an example. My daughter is 10, and I'm not yelling at her or anything, but she was under a stress past week. Why? Because she's taking the bus to camp, and her bus driver, hopefully they're not listening to the podcast, and her bus driver was very, I don't know what's the word. I don't even want to characterize, but let's say she was making everything comfortable for herself and less comfortable for us. She would pick us up at the wrong time and make it even earlier. She was changing things, and it was illegal what she was doing. So I called the camp and I requested that this is what's happening, and my child is not having a good experience. And that's not the issue. Here is the issue. My daughter was complaining nonstop about her bus driver, nonstop, like the whole week. One day on Friday, she complained for 2 hours from 5 to 7.
Oh my God.
That's how it was affecting her. And it was affecting me. I'm like, in my mind, would you stop talking about this bus driver? And I called the camp, rearranged a new bus, a new driver. Monday, she was supposed to go on a new bus. But let me tell you, the whole weekend she complained and wallowed in her stress, in her negativity, regardless of my help and support. On Monday, she goes, oh, the bus driver did it. I said, listen, honey, you have a new bus. Why are you still focused on the negative, on that other bus driver? You have a new reality now. That's what I'm saying. Our children's stress can come from other sources, not necessarily my poor parenting or my yelling. But imagine if I yelled at her and I did something ineffective, it could have made that stress that she was already going through even bigger.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It would add to it.
Yes, it would add to it because our children are normal human beings. They experience life as we do. And we know what happens when stress response is activated, right? All sorts of hormones and chemicals are flooding through your bloodstream, like adrenaline, cortisol, the stress hormone. And at times, it can take 4 hours for that cortisol to get out of your system, for you to go to your baseline. So it is highly important for us to be aware of this scientific facts so that we can not add fire to the oil to the fire. When our child is already hijacked in a stress response mode, we're not punishing or we're not using, traditional parenting tools that will keep them in a stress response. And child's flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, heart is pumping fast, and it affects their eating. They become picky eaters. It affects their sleep. We know what stress can do to a human body.
Yeah, and they can't learn in that moment. So basically, in any of these moments where we're trying to teach our child a different behavior or a different way of responding to whatever feelings are driving them, they are unable to learn when they're in this stress response. Oh my gosh, I've got a frog in my throat, guys. But yeah, they're just completely unable to learn. So if we're wanting to teach them, then that's not working.
Yes, it will not work. It's just your child's brain is completely turned off, no matter how much you yell and scream, and it's not going to help. What will help? We can talk about what will help.
Yes.
But I also want to say a few things, how yelling affects our children. It not only affects their brain, their physiology, right? Their all these things that we're mentioning, but it also erodes your relationship first and foremost.
Yes.
Just if you grew up in a household where there was a lot of yelling or abuse or violence or some kind of turbulence, I would ask you to reflect on this question. How do you want your children to remember you? And maybe perhaps journal and write about that. And also think about, how was it for you growing up? What do you wish your parents did instead of yelling or ineffective tools that they have used? What do you wish they did instead? Again, we're not blaming our parents or whatever, but think from a child's perspective. As a parent today, reflect back and journal about those things. And what is your goal in life? How do you want to do this parenting? I bet you want to parent differently than your parents, but we know how conditioning is so strong, it pulls us back into our roots. So
yes.
A relationship is very important. It affects our relationship. Our children don't take us seriously unless we yell. They get accustomed to the yelling. It becomes their norm. And we know that they tune out, they resent, they get angry, they start yelling back at us or at their peers. They think that's how you can get heard, right? That's how we modeled how if you want to get heard or if you have something serious or important to say, you just got to yell. Again, it affects fear. It affects in many different ways. A child feels damaged, perhaps, because if your child feels loved by you most of the time and all of a sudden they did something and you yelled, you lost your cool, well, that's a mixed message, right? Now the child is feeling less loved. and they internalize, not every child, some children are more sensitive than others. The child will think, I'm not welcomed, I am not loved, my mom doesn't love me, I am damaged goods, negative self-image will develop, limiting beliefs, right? We know as parents, we struggle with so many limiting beliefs from our own childhood, and with so many fears that we have. They originate in our childhood, right? So let's give our children a different kind of childhood as much as we can. It's not like we have to do this like perfectly. No, as much as possible, within your capacity, within your story, whatever your story is.
Yeah. As we wean ourselves kind of from it, as we practice to yell less and less, you realize like you can set boundaries without yelling. This is not about having your kids have a boundary free childhood, not at all. Like obviously you need to get your own needs met, that you have to set boundaries for your kids is really, really important. But we can set boundaries without modeling yelling and modeling fear, right? We're basically kind of, when we're yelling, it's just this bad habit that we might have where, that our triggered response is causing us to try to fight back, fight this threat. So we have to start to lower our trigger response, right? So let's transition into some ways that if we're in the habit of yelling, how do we stop? Because this was so hard for me. Like I remember I was just so triggered and I wanted to stop, and mindfulness really helps enormously. Like starting a meditation practice, that we do this work in mindful parenting where we practice so that you understand your triggers, you establish your own, short doable meditation practice that really has been proven to reduce your reactivity. That really helps. But you also need to practice in the moment, right? You need tools in the moment. So what are some tools that you suggest and you use to reduce your yelling?
Mm-hmm. First and foremost, let's say that you have always the option of just walking away in the moment. If you feel like you are about to yell, you're already yelling, you are flooded with hormones yourself, you are hot, you have an out of body experience. Everybody has a different response to stress. Know that it's okay just to go to the next room, to the kitchen, to get a glass of water, to breathe, and just go away from that trigger situation. It's totally fine. Walk away is a really good, your child, unless your child is in a dangerous situation, your siblings are strangling one another, unless something is serious, then go ahead, yell and separate and do whatever you have to do. But if it's not a life or death situation, which always is not, just siblings are fighting over a toy or, stuff like that, walk away. If you feel like you don't have a resource, inner ability to handle this in this moment mindfully, that's fine. Go away and come back. That's totally fine. But if you feel like you can handle it, then
let me interject here for a second, Anna, because I just want to share with people that I've definitely done that. Like when my daughter, I really distinctly remember putting my daughter when she was like 18 months old, she was just freaking out and having a big tantrum and I was getting triggered. And so I really distinctly remembered, putting her in her crib and walking away from her, walking through my bedroom, out on my balcony, and like where the trees were, and just breathing there and just taking that moment. She was screaming her head off, but I needed that moment. So it's a skillful response. Like we don't always want to like abandon our kid, right? Like because we don't want them to feel abandoned. But if it's the choice between you're
strangling your kid. Yes, absolutely.
And that's the more skillful response.
Yes, because if you haven't practiced mindfulness, if you have a trauma history and things like that, as a new mom, especially when children are crying, it can trigger so much stuff in you. Then you want to kill your child, you want to strangle, you just want to throw your baby, and it's easy. They are light, they don't talk, it's like you, in that moment, you see that child as a source of threat and danger, and you just want to aggressively treat that danger. So if you are in that state, walk away. It's best for your child to cry in that moment than for you to do something more dangerous and harmful. I know a mom, I had a client who killed her 6-month-old daughter. So people, this happens. So walk away.
And count it as a win. Like when you're having that
Yes.
conversation with yourself, say to yourself, this is good, I walked away. This was a skillful choice.
Yes. But that's not going to be your primary mode of operating, right? Yeah. Every time neglecting your kids like that, we recommend other things, which, when our children are young, it's a lot harder, I think, emotionally when they're older. Like yesterday, my daughter was, quote unquote, not listening to me. And of course, I'm triggered, I'm burning. I just want to say, yell and say my message in a loud voice, but I'm standing there and I'm like, Ella, can you hand that to me, sweetheart? Ella, please give that to me. And it took me so much effort. And I'm like, God damn it, this is not working. Ugh. Like you want to threaten in that moment, but I remained with it. It took a lot of effort, internal effort. I didn't threaten. I didn't use words or like, I'm going to take this away. I'm going to do this. It took a lot of effort. I'm not going to lie. It's not easy, but it was a lot harder when she was like a baby. And one day my daughter cried for 9 hours straight. I was,
oh my God,
pulling my hair. I was beating myself up 9 hours straight. I counted. And I was so helpless as a new mom. I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, is this motherhood? But it differs from stage to stage with your children's ages and all of that. So walk away. That's the first thing. In the moment, I think what's important in the moment is, again, this is what I would say, to tell yourself that this is not an emergency. Anything you face in your day with your children, with your siblings, I mean, as a mom, you can handle this. Listen, we can all handle, not necessarily always the right way or gracefully, but there's nothing we cannot handle, right? Every challenge that comes our way, we can handle. So I want parents to know to placate themselves in that moment. With the first step is give yourself compassion a little bit, if you can put your hand on your heart, if that helps you, and say, this is not an emergency. And maybe use a descriptive sentence to describe what you're seeing. Two siblings fighting in the living room over an iPad. So that when you say those words, you're engaging your prefrontal cortex, which in that moment of stress goes offline. So when you remind yourself that this is not an emergency, stress response, calm down. These are just two kids fighting over an iPad. I got this. You are comforting yourself already. You are, a few steps below the stress level now. The stress is a little behind you.
Yeah, you're getting that bit of separation. So you're describing acknowledging the situation, and you can even do that out loud, like say what you see out loud. That I see you guys fighting over an iPad. I'm feeling really frustrated. Like just kind of saying some of those things out loud. Wow, it provides so much relief just to state the facts of what is happening, and it gives you that sense of remove. And so, when you're saying it out loud, you're modeling skillful acknowledgement of a situation and skillful communication for your kids, and you're modeling how to take care of some of these difficult things for your kids out loud, which is good.
And also you can even state something with older kids. Like my kid is 10, I would say, Ella, what you're doing right now, it really, it triggers something in me. I don't want to feel this way, but I am about to lose my cool. This is not how I want to feel. And I don't want to lose my cool and do something or say something to you. You may even say that to your older kid, not to your 3-year-old, of course, but with your older kid. Sometimes older kids, like my daughter, can straight look into your eyes and do the thing anyway. The other day we were walking from a grocery store and we have a new car and we pledged as a family, but I never eat in the car. My daughter eats in the car. As a kid, there's snacks and things like that. With the new car, we said no eating in the car. Well, who is the first one to break that rule? We're in the grocery store. Mommy, can we get chips, like singles, chips in a single pack for camp? I said, sure. So we got some chips and, well, we're getting into the car. I see she's holding one. in her hands. I said, there is no eating in the car, sweetheart. Remember, you were the first one to, say this rule. She says, I'm not going to eat it in the car. I said, but you are entering into the car. And the temptation is huge, right? If it's in your hands, I said, you're going to obviously want to eat it. And she's like, no, I'm not. I'm just going to hold it. I said, Ella, give the chips to me. And I'm looking at her eyes directly. She's looking at me, Hunter, and she just poked the bag, opened the bag, right? Like by looking and just, oh, Mom, look what happened. It was an accident. in that moment,
I relate.
When they do something naughty and they look in your eyes, in that moment, I'm like, I want to kill this kid right now. How dare you do that? But of course I didn't. I said, please hand me the bag of chips. There is no eating in the car. I said, I'm going to hold it when we get home into the elevator. I'm going to give it to you. She just made this sour face and she says, here. So I took it and that's it. That was the end of it. But they just look into your eyes and do the thing anyway.
Oh man, I so relate, Anna. I so relate. Oh my gosh. So some of the tools were, just to go back over, we're walking away in the moment. Tell yourself this is not an emergency. I love that, because just getting that sense of remove. Give yourself compassion. I mean, the hand on the heart, the touch really does help. And like, this is hard right now, you might say to yourself, but this is not an emergency, right?
Yes.
And then describing the situation, and even out loud. Love
yes. That helps. That engages your prefrontal cortex. And so now, so to speak, let's say there's a fire. You think there is a fire. You grab all your extinguisher and all the gear to come into extinguishing the fire. You arrive and there is no fire. What are you going to do? Put the extinguisher away, right? Have a different approach. It's just a smoke, let's say. So that's what I want people to have, that kind of approach. In that moment, say yourself, this is not an emergency. It's just siblings fighting. Then you can breathe. It doesn't take much time. I mean, honestly, it takes a few seconds. You can do a little self-talk, right, in your mind, whatever tools you want to use in that moment. Or you can say, I forgot what I was going to say.
You were saying it doesn't take a lot of time. You can do some self-talk.
Yes. These steps that we're describing doesn't take a lot of time. It will take the same amount of time as you were to yell and use an effective way. It's the same amount of time that you are going to use to handle the situation. So even though the description sounds like step by step, a long process, but if I were to do this in the first a few times, because it's a little unknown, it takes a little bit of mindful effort, but then it becomes second nature. You don't think about it. I'm doing step 1, I'm doing step 2. It's sort of, you do it automatically.
Yeah. And I would recommend, you can write down those steps and kind of put them up in the, on a Post-it in your kitchen cabinet or whatever. I mean, for me, Anna, I inherited my father's temper, and he had such a rage, that I really got scared a lot when I was a kid, when he would be really angry at me. And I felt that rage really coming out. And for me, sometimes I could feel that anger and it was a little bit easier, but sometimes it was like a fiery demon had come out in me. And for me, I had to not only just walk away. Some of the things I did, I would walk out of my house. I would literally put my hands on this big boulder outside my house. So I would ground myself literally, and I would breathe and then sometimes cry, because that crying would just be that release, right, that I needed of that tension. Sometimes you can, in the midst of the chaos, there's some yoga moves. You can try child's pose or a forward fold. These are things that kind of fold you down, turn you inward, just give you a moment to let out a big loud sigh out of your mouth, which, the studies have shown changes that brain chemistry, releases a lot of those hormones. So using those physical tools of literally grounding yourself, folding yourself over, letting out big sighs, try 5 or 6 big, loud, dramatic sighs just to release. Those are just kind of physiological hacks that can help bring your body, kind of slow down that runaway train of the stress response, and kind of bring you into that fight, into that rest and relax response, which is what you're going to need to be able to say, Okay. And then deal with the situation more thoughtfully.
Mm-hmm. Basically, to summarize and to put a label on what you just said, is we want to feel safe in that moment. Whatever is going to make you feel safe, you're going to engage your safeness system. Because when you are in that hyper aroused, stressed out mode, when your stress response is on, you're experiencing threat. We have two systems, the threat system and a safety system. These two cannot coexist at the same time together. You cannot feel safe and threat at the same time. So know that when you're in that mode, you are experiencing threat. What can make you feel safe? Either, like you described, you put your hand on something, you grab something to feel grounded, or your feet, give yourself a hug in that moment, or put your hands on your arms and press a little bit so you feel like you have a body, a container. Because when you are hijacked like that, oftentimes biologically it feels like an out of body experience. You want to come back to your body so that you will be less reactive. Put your hand on your heart, again, releases oxytocin, and start breathing. The first step for me is usually calming your body, telling your body that you are safe with either breathing, combination of breathing, touch, body movement, holding something, pushing the wall, or things of that nature, whatever is in your environment in that moment. The first step is to tell your body biologically that I am safe. And then say those words to yourself, even if need be. You can say, I am safe, there is no danger, it's not an emergency, whatever works for you. I think my listeners told me that this is not an emergency, worked for them really well. It calms you down right away, sort of, and you're like, okay, I can handle this. That's the first step. Second step for me, I would say, is that language aspect, right? I'm helping my child. This is not an emergency. That's the second step. The first is the body, the safety. The third step is to now direct your attention to your child. Now that you did these preliminary things with yourself, you're a lot calmer and less reactive, much more less. Now that you can look at your child and dish out a little compassion or empathy for your child or your children, or listen to them, or I want to help my child. They seem like they're dysregulated, whatever the situation is. And again, I would say even engage your senses a little bit. Try to identify like sounds in the environment, or in that moment, you can look at your own clothing, say I'm wearing stripes, or look at your children, they're wearing red and blue. Engage your senses. Either auditory is good, or visual, or again, it sort of brings you to the here and now, right? Feel your feet on the ground. Somehow try to come to the present moment, and so that you can go and address the issue.
Yeah. Come to your senses and out of the story in your head, which is freak out and panic because something is happening. Oh my God, Anna, this is so wonderful. So you have shared so much wisdom with this. I love this. Just learning about the brain, those crucial first years, the neuroplasticity, and just understanding about our own bodies and our own stress response gives us so many more tools to work with and to create those positive relationships. This is awesome.
Can I just say one last thing to leave our listeners with, and that would be the end of the discussion. So when you catch yourself yelling, I want you to picture a forest in your mind, recall like this image of a forest, and try to see there's two paths. One path is the left path and the right path. The right path is the one that is familiar. You walk down that path and it's a worn down path. And the other one is, it has weeds and bushes. It doesn't even look like a path because it's not worn down. Imagine this image. This is your brain. You're cultivating a new pathway. The right path of this forest is the yelling path, is your usual conditioning. You go down this path all the time. But if you want to choose a different path, it has to be intentional. You stop at the fork of the two paths, visualize this, and say, I'm going down the left path. And the more you go down the left path, practice daily, weekly, that path eventually will be worn down just like the old path. And what will happen to the old path? Weeds will grow and it will be like a bushy, unknown territory because you're not going down that path, right? So this is what I imagine creating a new pathway, creating a new habit is. So this visual image, maybe you can, do this visualization as a practice, close your eyes and intentionally choose that path, and hopefully it will help.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's literally what's happening in the brain. We're kind of bushwhacking a new path. So it's uncomfortable and it's hard. So Anna, do you never yell now? Are you like a perfect never yeller?
I have to be honest, I was never a yeller. That was not my default setting. So to speak, my factory setting was not a yeller. I can guilt my child. I can use psychological tools to make her feel bad and things like that. But yelling was not in my toolbox. I don't think my parents yelled. So that wasn't the case for me. Well, I raised my voice. I mean, of course, sure. It's not like, but I'm not one of those parents who is yelling every day, a few times a day. That's not my default. I'm not going to lie. But I work hard. There's a difference, right, between yelling and screaming and raising your voice. Sometimes you need to raise your voice to make a point.
Yeah.
So I think I've definitely raised my voice and screamed at times, but it's not my go-to method, so to speak.
Well, as I was raised in a yelling household, and yelling was sort of a default for me. And I can just attest to you, dear listener, that yes, like you can reduce it enormously, so that your relationship with your child is built on, they want to cooperate with you. You're not using that fear as much. And as it really can be a positive snowball effect, as you choose that less worn path, it becomes easier and easier over time. And because as you start to use maybe, skillful communication and things like that, things can snowball in a more easier and easier way. But if you continue to practice like the old school techniques of yelling and using fear and punishment, it actually snowballs in a more difficult, it gets harder and harder way where you have to kind of escalate things. But I can tell you that you can really reduce that yelling. I have for sure. But, I still yell sometimes. And it doesn't mean we don't have wonderful relationships now. Sometimes when I yell, I'm so frustrated. I need a break. And that's like, I see that as perfectly fine and totally skillful. But sometimes I just am like, ah. So really, I want you, listener, to aim for good enough, right? We don't want to aim for perfect. If we are all the time perfect, meeting every single one of our child's needs and, never are human and authentic, all those like little challenges they have, give children a chance to build resiliency. So you don't have to be perfect. Just be you and just be that, the real you, the untriggered you. Aim for that.
And if you put this pressure on yourself that I'm not going to yell, I'm going to do everything not to yell, I'm committing myself to not yelling for 30 days. Let me tell you, dear listener, that's not a good reason. You're bound to fail, and that's a pressure in and of itself that's going to add to your yelling. And if you don't yell, you may develop a heart disease or something like that. So sometimes you need that energy to come out. That stress energy has to get out of your system. So don't commit to yourself in those kind of things that I'm not going to yell for a whole year. You know what I mean? The knowledge information, I think, is significant. The neuroscience behind this stuff. Reduce the stress in your life and practice skillful communication and mindfulness. Also, and this is the last thing I swear, celebrate your small wins.
Yes.
Swim in it. Allow yourself to soak up. Like, let's say, I didn't yell yesterday. Don't let that just slip away. No. Magnify that. Be in it and say, oh my gosh, wow, I did it. It felt so good. Just try to evoke feelings, how it feels, that little win, that will give you a dopamine hit and encourage you, wire your brain to seek that kind of reaction again and again and again, that kind of response. So help your brain, and you sort of educate your brain that this wins, this is what I'm looking for, brain. Soak up your little wins, celebrate them, pat yourself, give yourself high five in the mirror, hug yourself, enjoy that little moment. That enjoyment has to last a little bit. Otherwise, you're not cultivating the very important skill.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Anna. What a perfect way to end this conversation. I really appreciate that so much. So, Anna Seewald, where can people find out more about you and your wonderful podcast?
Well, people can go to authenticparenting.com. That's my online home, and listen to Authentic Parenting Podcast wherever they listen to podcasts. And I want to say some of my listeners are your listeners. We have a common mutual listenership, and I want to extend, gratitude and hugs to all of you. You know who you are. Thank you for being a listener to Mindful Mama Podcast and Authentic Parenting Podcast. We love you.
Yes, we do. I ditto that. Anna, thank you so much. Your voice, authentic is the most perfect word for it, because your voice is so authentic and so real. And I love how the clarity and the wisdom you bring to things, and how you bring it all down to earth, and you make it real for us and doable. And that makes a huge difference for myself, who I have learned from your wisdom in the past, and so many others. You're really bringing so many great things to the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Mindful Mama podcast. I know that this is one you are going to listen to again and again, because there's so much good information in here about how to stop yelling. I hope that you will be taking steps to reduce your stress response, reduce the overall stress in your life, knowing that it's so important, right? We don't get this time back. There are no do-overs. So this is really important. These relationships last a lifetime, and we can make a huge impact on them just by choosing to change our intentions and to change our priorities a little bit. It can be really powerful. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out and contact me. I've been sharing a lot of my life on Instagram lately. You get the kind of behind the scenes of Mindful Mama Mentor on Instagram, and that's at Mindful Mama Mentor. You can find me. And I hope that you will join us, of course, on the free training that is coming up at mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. It's an exciting time for us. And we have also some spots and retreats and things that are open. I'm coming out to California. Got a couple spots left, so maybe you'll join me. But definitely, wherever you are in the world, I want to reach out. I want to talk. I want to connect at that Mindful Parenting free training. It's open to everyone. It's open to your partner. They can come on and learn some things and kind of really check in in a really deep level on their parenting. So your friends, all that stuff. So invite them to it, and I will see you there at mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. So I'm wishing you a beautiful week, my friend. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please share it around. And I'm wishing you, less stress, more love, more joy, more ease. We could all use that, right? Let's do it. We can take steps in that direction. We can support each other. Wishing you all that, my friend. Thank you so much for listening. Namaste. Are you frustrated with parenting? Do you want to practice conscious, compassionate parenting, but you don't know how? It's not easy, and there's no roadmap for this. Until now. I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I know how frustrating it is because I've been there. I struggled as a young mom, and when I found myself yelling and triggered by my child, I knew there had to be a better way, and there is. Mindful parenting is different from other parenting trainings. They don't tell you that all of that good advice is as good as useless when our internal stress response is triggered. Mindful parenting teaches you research-based tools and practices to reduce your stress response so that you can respond rather than react. And it teaches you exactly what to say so that you can create willing cooperation from your child. You can learn more and enroll at mindfulparentingcourse.com, and you can join us for a free live training coming up soon where you'll learn why your kids don't listen to you, how your brain undermines your parenting, and how to create cooperative kids without losing your temper. Sign up now at mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. That's mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. I'll see you there.